Okay, so one more type that you might see in lesson 6.2 is it's still find the inverse, but it's a bigger matrix. So this time I've got a 3 by 3. So there's a lot more going on with this one. It's going to take us quite a bit longer. So I just want to make sure I showed you one of these. So it starts out like this. And I want it to look like that reduced form. Okay, so a reduced form, remember, would be ones on the diagonal and zeros everywhere else. Okay, so I have to have a 0 here and a 0 here, 0 here, 0 here, 0 here, 0 here. Okay, so I want to trade these places. So how do I get this 2 to be a 0, or to be a 1, sorry. If I take, remember when I want to make it a 1, the best thing to do is multiply by something, if at all possible. In this case, I would multiply by a half, because half of 2 is 1. So I'm going to take half of row 1, and that's going to give me that value. So half of 2 is 1, half of 0 is still 0, half of 1 is 1/2, half of 1 is 1/2, half of 0 is 0, half of 0 is 0. The rest of these stayed the same. So 2, 1, -1, 3, 1, -1, 0, 0, 1. Okay, so the next step, let's make this one. So I already have this one as a 1 and this one as a 0. So why not get this one to be a 0? So I'm just going to move down here. I could go with this one. I could go straight across. I'm going to go with this one, though, this time. So if I want this to be a 0, remember to get it to be a 0. If you can subtract one of the other rows away from it or add, that would be helpful. But you would need to multiply by something to make that happen in most cases. So in this case, if I subtract this one away, if I can make that a 2, that would be great. So I'm going to take my row 2, and I'm going to subtract away 2 times row 1. Now I'm going to try to squeeze it in here. All right, so first let's go ahead and take it times -2. Let's take my row 1 times -2. So that's going to give me -2 for that one. 0 times -2 is 0. 1/2 times -2 is -1. Again, -1, 0, and 0. So I'm not going to be subtracting anything on those. Okay, and then I'm going to subtract these. So 2 minus a 2 is 0. 1 minus a 0 is still 1. -1 minus 1 would be -2. So be careful with your integers. If you need a calculator, use it. Hopefully you can get through that without it. 0 minus a 1 would be -1. 1 minus 0 is 1. And then 0 minus 0 is 0. Okay. Then my top row stays exactly the same. My bottom row stays exactly the same. Okay, so now I think I'm just going to work my way down. I think I'm going to do this one next. So I like that this is a 1 because then I can make these other 2 zeros very easily. So I'm going to do it the same way as I did this one. So I'm going to take, I'll write it right here. I'm going to take row 3 and I'm going to subtract away 3 times row 1. So if I take row 1 times 3 and I subtract it from this, that's going to make that 0. So again, I'm going to go through and I'm going to multiply it by, I'm going to say a -3. So -3 there. This would be 0. This would be a -3/2, which is kind of weird again, but that's okay. -3/2 there. 0 and 0. So I'm subtracting away zeros on those and then that other stuff on those. Okay, so let's write what we would have if we actually put those together. So if I take 3 minus 3, I get 0. Remember, I'm changing my row 3, so I'm going to put it down here on the bottom. And then this one, 1 minus 0 is still 1. A -1 minus 3/2, that's going to give me negative, I'm going to write it as 5/2. You could have written it as -2.5. This would be -3/2. This would be 0. and 1 minus 0 is 1. So I will say too, the biggest mistake that I see on problems like these is where people accidentally, instead of saying 1 minus 0 is 1, they put 0 there just on accident. So just little mistakes like that. So just be careful, watch for those things. First and second rows stay the same, so I'm just going to fill those in real quick. Okay, so far this is looking pretty good. So I'm going to work my way back to, I'm going to look at this one because this seems like a really easy one to get rid of. So remember, we want this situation right here. So this first column is perfect. This second column, this one right here is the only one that needs fixed. That needs to be a 0. So how can I do that? I can just take row 3 minus row 2. I don't have to multiply by anything this time. So row 3 minus row 2 is what I'm going to do. Okay, so top row, I'm going to go ahead and fill that one in because it's going to stay the same. Second row is going to stay the same. Okay, this one, if I'm going to subtract these, 0 minus 0 is 0. 1 minus 1 is 0. Negative 5 halves minus negative 2. So be careful with that. If I subtract these, that means I'm actually adding 2 to this one. So that's going to give me, what, a negative 1/2. And then a negative 3/2 plus a 1 again. That's going to be a negative 1/2 again. And then 0 minus 1 is negative 1. And 1 minus 0 is 1. Okay, so I'm looking pretty good now. Now I'm going to try to get, let's see, let's go ahead and try to make this one a 1 because it just makes sense to get all of my 1s done so that then I can do those zeros like I did on these other ones by subtracting. So if I want to make this a 1, how do I make that happen? If I take negative 2 times negative 1/2, I get 1. So if I take negative 2 times row 3, that'll give me what I'm wanting. So negative 2 times 0 is 0. 0. This one would be 1, which is what I wanted. This one would also be 1. Negative 2 times negative 1 is 2. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. And then again, these stay the same. Okay. So now I've got 2 more to deal with here. So let's say I deal with this one first. I would take that row 2 that it's in, and I would subtract away. And this is kind of tricky how I'm going to write this. So instead of saying subtract it away, I just want to put this and this together times 2 here. So I'm actually going to add those together this time because this one's negative. So if I take 2 times row 3, that gives me a 2 right there. And a negative 2 plus a 2 is 0. And that's what I want that to be. Okay, so let me take 2 times row 3 right here. So 2 times that is 0, 2 times that is 0, 2 times that is 2, 2, 4, and negative 4. And I'm just going to add these values together. Okay, so again, let me help out a little bit by just going ahead and writing in that top row because it's already done. My second row is the one that's going to change. So my bottom row, I'm going to go ahead and write it in as well, unchanged. So I'm changing it to multiply right here to add it to this one, but I'm not actually going to change that row. So I'm going to leave this row as is. I'm just using it to fix this one. Okay, so this one, if I put 0 and 0 together, I get 0. If I put 0 and 1 together, I get 1. So notice that when I do things like this, I'm trying to only change this value, not the other two. So if I multiply by that by something and add it, I'm just adding zeros here. So that's not going to change anything. All right, so that becomes 0. Negative 1 plus 2 would be positive 1. And then 4 plus 1 would be a 5. And a negative 4 plus a 0 is a negative 4. Okay, So that means I just have one left to do. So I've got all my zeros in place, all my ones in place, except for this one right here. This needs to be a 0. So how do I get that to be a 0? Well, the only thing that I can use is row 3 to add or subtract, right? But if I want this to be, if I'm going to subtract, like I have to in this case, I've got to take this times a half. So I'm going to take row 1, this row up here, and I'm going to subtract away half of row 3. And that's going to give me what I want. So again, half of row 3, and I'm going to subtract it. So I'm going to put a minus with it. So I'm not going to be subtracting anything on those. I'm going to subtract half on this one, subtract half on that one, subtract 1 on that one because half of 2 is 1. And then this one, half of -2 is -1, and I'm going to subtract -1. So that means I'm actually adding 1 on that one. All right, so again, this row is going to stay the same. This row is going to stay the same. And then my top row, now I'm going to actually put these together. So 1 minus 0 is 1, 0 minus 0 is 0, 1/2 minus 1/2 is 0, 1/2 minus 1/2 is 0, 0 minus 1 is -1, and 0 plus 1 is 1. So there, I'm done. This is looking perfect. So that means my inverse is this side over here that's left. So 0 there. Okay, so there is my inverse. Now, last thing that I will mention, if you had to check, if they said, please check your work, you could take this times this, and you should end up with this reduced form again. So if I multiply those two times each other, same thing with the opposite direction. If I take this one times this one, I should also get this. If that happens both ways, then yes, that is the inverse, okay?